There are a few things the literary world loves more than a scandal, especially when it involves the unmasking of an anonymous author, and even better when it involves sex. That's the sort of storm Australian writer Nikki Gemmell found herself in 8 years ago when she was revealed as the author of The Bride Stripped Bare. It was a book about a young wife who, shall we say, goes on a journey of sexual discovery. At the time, there was a huge kerfuffle, not just about whether the book was based on Nikki Gemmell's own life, but also whether the whole anonymous thing was part of a savvy marketing ploy. And for the record, she denies both. Now the writer has released a follow-up novel, With My Body, and it covers similar terrain. I sat down with Nikki Gemmell and she told me that her recovery from The Bride Stripped Bare was slow.
It took me about 3 years to climb out of the whole brouhaha of the whole thing, the kind of shock of losing control in my life and how that would impact on other people. And I vowed at the time I would never go near anything like that again. I would never tackle a book like that again. And I think it was just maturing and growing up and becoming my own person and finding my voice, which I think women do in their 40s. You know, in my early to mid-30s when I was writing Bride, that book was about a new marriage, a woman who hadn't had a child, all those kind of things. This is a different scenario in terms of a woman who's in the thick of motherhood, marriage, all those kind of things, has felt that she's lost herself, that life has chipped away at her in some way, and she's desperately trying to regain something of that woman that she used to be, that she feels like has completely gone, and it's how she finds that woman again.
I've heard you say elsewhere that you think that women would rather have no sex than bad sex. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think as we get older, we won't stand for bad sex. Because we learn and we find our voices and we say, no, I don't want that. When we're younger, we capitulate. Edith Wharton said that young women have a curtain of niceness. And, that often means that we'll say yes when we're really screaming to say no, or we'll do something that we're not necessarily wanting to do. As we get older, I guess we become more like grumpy old women or whatever it is. But that can be incredibly empowering, and I've got women around me who are having the best sex of their lives now that babies and all that kind of thing is out of the way. They've got knowledge and they know what to say now.
But is it like me saying, you only want sex if it's good sex? Is it like me saying, well, I only want to do an interview if it's a brilliant interview? I mean, sometimes I have brilliant guests, sometimes I have mediocre guests, sometimes I have a very annoying guest. It just depends what you get on any given day, and that's what you've got to go with.
Yes, well, sex, as with life, as with anything, is about generosity and a generous heart. And relationships are about compromise and all that kind of thing, and kindness. I think kindness is such an underrated quality within a relationship. And so perhaps kindness may mean that you're going to be doing things sometimes that you don't necessarily want to. But I think when the situation becomes gruelling, exhausting and grinding, then something has to change.
I was wondering, are women, I guess, of, say, our age, sitting around and fantasising about having mind-blowing sex, or are they sitting around and fantasising about having mind-blowing sleep and fantasising about their husband doing 3 loads of washing without being nagged?
It is. It's fantasising about the partner who'll make the kids lunches and pick up their socks and pick up their towels and just let them have a weekend away where they can just go to a really lovely hotel and just sleep all by themselves. I said to one of my little boys last year at my birthday, I'm going to have a sleep party and I'm just going to sleep and sleep and sleep for my birthday the whole weekend. And he was like, Mummy, can I come too? And he couldn't understand why I was going, no. This is a party just for me, all by myself.
Just a mummy's party.
Yeah.
So given that then, why have you chosen with both of these books to focus on women and sex, I suppose, rather than those broader life questions?
In a way, I want both books to be a manifesto wrapped up in a compelling narrative, a grand love story in some way. But I want them to be a manifesto about women finding their voice and their sexuality. I think both Bride and this one arose from women just saying things to me like, perfectly honestly, I've never had an orgasm, or I don't like my husband kissing me, or what is this thing when he wants to touch my breast? I can't stand it. Or whatever it is. And just being deeply honest. And I wanted to look at the personas that we all put forward, even within a marriage. Gabriel Garcia Marquez said that everyone has 3 lives: a public life, a private life, which we might show to our husbands or our partners or whatever, and a secret life. And that's our innermost thoughts. And with both these books, I wanted an excruciating honesty in a way, but kind of the visceral rawness of a woman's sexuality, which perhaps a lot of male partners don't actually know about. And I'm fascinated by that. And it also changes. You know, a woman in her teens or in her 20s is different to the woman in her 30s, different to the woman in her 40s, to the woman in her 60s or 70s.
But how much do you think a woman's inner life and inner secret life is taken up with questions of sexuality?
Well, I think it's an enormous part of a woman's secret life. Vita Sackville-West said that she was like an iceberg, and her husband, you know, could just see that little tiny sliver at the top above the ocean, and then there was this huge mass underneath that he had no idea about. And I agree with that. And the first time around with Bride, I found that anonymity was a liberation, that I could write about that huge mass underneath that men perhaps won't clock into. But this time around, you know, I'm in my mid-40s now, I feel liberated. I can do it. I feel empowered to do it.
But on that question of anonymity, I mean, isn't the whole premise of fiction that it's made up?
Yes.
And had you put it out under your real name, would people have thought it was made up? I mean, I guess I'm wondering, did having By Anonymous make people think, well, she must have something to hide, it must be about her real life?
I've had this problem with my novels ever since my first one, Shiver, and I've had to counter those questions all through my writing career. And so I thought with an explosive subject like sex and all the rest of it, I just didn't want to buy into it. I'd also just had a baby, I was tired, I wasn't thinking straight, all those kind of things.
Do you invite, I guess, those sorts of questions? Because there are so many parallels between the characters in your book and what's going on in your own life. Like, say, for example, in your new book, that it's an Australian woman living in London, she has 3 kids, she takes a sort of sabbatical, if you like, to Australia.
Yes.
All those things that are just like your life.
Yes. Well, I guess I'm an observer, and I pluck things from around me, particularly in terms of landscape. I often think that my writing begins with landscape, and so I have to write about a place that I've been in. And saying that the protagonist with my body is a doctor's wife in Gloucestershire, which is so removed from my world.
But it's not an option for you to think, OK, well, I want to mine some of my own life experiences, but I'm going to make this woman be living in the United States and only have 1 child, or just so that people don't ask these endless questions about it. Well, is this you and Andrew, Nikki?
Yes. No. It's kind of like it's a wellspring of observations about life. It's like baking a cake, and you've got all the different ingredients around you, and you throw them all into the mix and then put it in the oven, and it comes out, and what comes out at the end is completely different to what you've thrown in the first place. But it all goes towards creating the book.
And an extended version of that chat with Nikki Gemmell will be available on our website.